sister song. It is not the only definition, so I'm going to actually share with you this one, and then I'm going to share another one with you as well. But it's the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, to have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and supportive communities. So one of the things I like about this definition is, one, it acknowledges that it's a human right. And I'll go through the little pieces of bodily autonomy and so on as we go through. Another definition that I like to think about is from Color, which is one of our local reproductive justice organizations here. And the part that's a little different for them, they say all of this, so I can have bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children I have in safe and supportive communities, or safe and sustainable, communities. But all of that is without fear of violence, discrimination, separation, surveillance, or retaliation from individuals or the government. I think that's important to note, that I can do all of these things, and we talk sometimes about the discrimination and fear piece, but that surveillance and retaliation piece is another one that we'll talk a little bit more about. Alrighty, so bodily autonomy. I love, all the art is from Repeal Hide, so if you want to go look it up, that's where you can find it. So I love this art about non-binary beach ready. So every body is beach ready, but the right for a person to govern what happens to their body without external influence or coercion. Coercion can look a lot of different ways. I did a whole workshop specifically on what coercion is on an individual level, and then I'm doing one a little bit later on in the year on coercion within our systems and how we as a culture can also be coercive, but to think about how I can make choices about my physical body, what I do and don't do with my physical body, what I eat, what I don't eat, and so on. My faith has taught me to love and treat people with respect, just as I want to be treated and respected. Your story is valid, you are worthy, it's the system that's broken. When I think of bodily autonomy, one of the groups that I often think about is the intersex community. It is one that oftentimes we don't talk as much about. And for me, it's important because their stories do go unheard. There's a lot of shame about for people who are intersex because of society norms. So what intersex is, it's a person whose external body does not align with what someone has decided this is where everything lands. This is one way or another. So that can be chromosomes, can be the external bodies, more your reproductive organs, internal or external. It can be chromosomes, it can be hormonal levels, all of those things. The science people have wrote little magic list and said, this is what makes somebody one gender or another. And individuals who don't land all the way in one or another would be an individual who could fall under that umbrella of intersex. Intersex is something people might know at birth. It's something they might not know till later in life. That could be at puberty, but I know an individual who didn't find out she was intersex till she was in her 60s. And so recognizing that there's a variety of reasons why someone may know or may not know. And we as a society don't go around doing chromosome tests and hormone tests and doing a lot of x-rays and medical things on every single person. So we are finding out later in life individuals that fall under that umbrella of intersex. This is one group where bodily autonomy is very, very important. We are hearing a lot more of a movement. Interact is one of the orgs doing work around the intersex community on how can we be advocates to recognize that people should not have anything done to their body without their consent, including babies. You deserve bodily autonomy, including the right to express your gender without fear, harassment, or violence. I am so grateful that words continue to grow so we can make sure as a society we're using the best words to describe people and what it is they're doing. So one of the things that I love is the notion of gender confirmation surgery, that this surgery may confirm in some way or another how I'm aligning with my body. For some people that is not necessary, it depends on the person, but it's a way of acknowledging that it is confirming externally something that is already known internally. It can also be talked about as reconstructive surgery, and also just, I can express however I want. My partner back home is part of the Beard Society. It's a whole thing, they have a whole calendar. And last year for their calendar, they did photo shoots and he had on this kilt and that was his picture, and they do a lot of different activities to raise money. And I think about, could he wear that kilt to work? Probably not. And that's one way of expressing without any fear, harassment, or violence. And oftentimes the way our society is, one gender, and I will say females, get a long list and breadth of what we can wear without it being outside of a box, versus other people, and I would say males generally, have a very small box of what they can wear that's considered gendered this way or that way. So another part of bodily autonomy is the notion of people just being able to control what happens to their body and not having to experience any kind of assault on their body. Oftentimes for particular groups, Native American, bisexual individuals, trans women, they're experiencing sexual assault at higher rates and their bodily autonomy is violated. Another thing I try and encourage people to learn more about is, what are we doing as we talk about bodily autonomy, as we talk about children and young people? Oftentimes we think of sexual assault and we connect it to women, but how are we including boys and men in the conversation, especially thinking about our early elementary school age kids? So when we look at sexual assault, 0 to, let's say, 60 years of age, then women are overrepresented. But when we start to chunk that time and we're looking at boys specifically under the age of 10 are more likely to be assaulted than girls under the age of 10. So being able to take some time back and realize that our society has framed these narratives of who it is that experiences sexual violence, and that leaves other people out without care and access to people who can hear their stories and acknowledge their realities. Last thing, under bodily autonomy, I would put sex worker rights. So it is your body. So they only try to silence you because they're afraid of your power. I think that's important to think about the power that sex workers have. It is one of the oldest professions, and it is their power, it is their body. And being engaged in bodily autonomy and saying this is something that's important to me says I also have to recognize that if someone is engaged in sex work, that is their body and that is their choice as well. So the right to have children is what I'm going to talk about now. This is Repeal Hyde's art project. So happy Mother's Day too, recognizing that mothers come in so many different ways, and also that mothers may not be around. So we want to acknowledge anywhere that mothers may be. My faith has allowed me to connect more intimately with my patients, especially those who also are guided by some spiritual belief, even if it differs from my own. Your trauma does not define you. I think this is really important when we're talking about people who are experiencing infertility or miscarriages. We know that there is a racial disparity, that Black women have a significantly higher odds of experiencing infertility than white women do, that when we look at socioeconomic factors and others, that doesn't account for why Black women have higher rates of infertility, and they also have less access oftentimes to fertility methods. So when we're thinking about IVF or other IVI and other things that people might do to help create a family, they don't generally have as much access to that. Part of that is under this ability to have children is us addressing PCOS and fibroids and infertility, which is higher for Black women. All pregnant and postpartum people deserve access to full spectrum doula care. Part of having children is the birthing process. So how are we supporting individuals during their birthing process? How are we ensuring that if someone is desiring to have a vaginal birth, that we're doing everything we can to assist them with that, that the hospitals where they deliver are equitable? This is just some information on why choose a doula. So individuals who do have doulas have better pain management. They're less likely to use epidurals, they have fewer C-sections and so on. The part that I think is important is this is a choice that's not afforded to everybody. So recognizing that having access to doula care is often tied to income. And so how can we ensure that there is birth equity and people have more options to who's supporting them during that birthing process? Providing abortion to people who want it affirms both their humanity and our own. Acting in the way that is kindest to our fellow humans is something to strive for. Oops. Your story is valid. You are worthy. It's the system that's broken. So one of the reasons that people don't generally utilize birth control is because they struggle to get access to birth control. And so part of it is saying the reality is everyone deserves access to birth control, and that includes whatever type they want. So there shouldn't be a this is the only type of birth control that you can use, or this is the only type of birth control that we approve for our health insurance or for our organization. It's being able to recognize that everyone deserves access to a full spectrum of options of birth control. It's also being able to recognize if someone's choosing more long-term birth control, such as LARC, like a IUD, or choosing to have their tubes tied or hysterectomy, that's birth control as well. And if someone's choosing abortion, that story is valid and they need access to that regardless of where they live. The last part I want to talk to y'all about is safe and supportive communities. So you deserve to live in a safe and healthy neighborhood. Environmental justice is reproductive justice. So low-income communities are generally near polluting facilities that emit chemicals and toxins. Some of that can cause miscarriages and infertility and birth defects. And people of color represent 56% of populations that live within 1.8 miles of commercial hazardous waste facilities. So when we think about environmental justice, we're not just talking about lead, we're not just talking about water and paint, but we're also talking about where we're choosing to place things in our community and who we're choosing to place things by. You deserve to feel safe and supported. What that means is that you're free from violence in your neighborhood, so your neighborhood is not over-policed, and that you're also free to access supportive services if you are experiencing family violence, whether that be domestic violence or sexual violence, but you deserve to experience people are supporting you, you know who to call, how to call them, that they're gonna come and respond, that you're gonna be believed. All of that is part of being able to be in a safe and supportive community. I love this graphic. There's a lot on it, and I'm just gonna pull out a little bit of it because I think I could probably do a day worth of presentation on all the pieces that are sexual freedom and what that means. So I'm just gonna redo all this and then I'll pull out a couple pieces that I didn't hit on yet. So bodily autonomy, sex workers' rights, accessible sexual health care, access to contraception, reproductive rights, consent, gender equality, comprehensive sex ed, acceptance of LGBTQIA people, I would say more like celebration, but acceptance of kink and BDSM, acceptance of non-monogamy, safe and empowered birth, no slut or prude shaming. All of this goes together. And part of doing reproductive justice work is being able to recognize that in order for people to have bodily autonomy, they have to learn about their bodies. In order for people to access birth control, they have to have comprehensive sex ed so they can learn, why do I need birth control? How do I even take birth control effectively? It's recognizing that sexual freedom includes everyone who is a sexual being and those who aren't as well. That we are acknowledging that adults can choose the types of relationships that they want and the way that those relationships look in a way that makes them feel happy and content. That we want people to be safe, and safe is defined by the individuals. And we want people to, along the spectrum, know that how they engage in relationships and how they decide, as far as the slut shaming or prude shaming, how they decide to engage in those relationships are their choices to make. We also have to look at, when we're looking at all of these things, we have to add another layer of all the different people there are. So it's recognizing that we're talking about disability rights, when we're talking about bodily autonomy, that when we talk about access to sexual health care, we're talking about individuals in rural communities. When we talk about acceptance of LGBTQIA, we're including our immigrant community members. That everyone is included in these conversations, regardless of gender, age, or location. And it is up to us to make sure that everyone feels included in these conversations by having vocabulary and words that are inclusive across the board, not just saying one group and talk